So you've talked about your goals, you've talked about your metrics and priorities in that. What about your team? How do you align your resources to achieve the goals and priorities that you've been working on?
Yeah, good question. I principally have three functions that report into me, and it's easy to think of them as discrete, although it's really more of a Venn diagram that exists between the three different teams. The three different teams are, the first one is the go-to-market and strategy organization. There are two sub-pieces to that. One of them is field operations, and the other one is a reporting and analytics unit. So the overall go-to-market and strategy team is doing things like helping to design what the go-to-market strategy is. Every organization is slightly resource constrained, if not very resource constrained. We have, for example, 115 global sellers. We have a target market of 370,000 potential customers and prospects that we can sell to. So how do you align those 115 sellers to going after 370,000 potential accounts? You clearly have a scale problem. And so making sure that we're aligning the teams and we're going about the market correctly to try to maximize the return for invested time is very important. The field operations team, which is part of the go-to-market and strategy team, is really the execution arm of strategy. So they're the business consultants with the field organization, and their job is to make sure that they're driving whatever operational changes. I mentioned change management earlier. Their job is principally to make sure that they're working through change management with the field sales leadership organization. And then the last part of the go-to-market strategy team is really reporting and analytics. You can't get better unless you're measuring the business. And so constantly measuring the business for multiple stakeholders, for our board, for our executive leadership team, for the sales leadership team, and Randy, even for your team, so that we can understand how we're executing against deals and where we're seeing throughput of deals and where we're not, is important to growing the business. The second team that reports to me is our global enablement function. And that is not only an onboarding function, designed to try to get people ramped up and to productivity as fast as possible. There's ongoing enablement in every organization. There's new product launches, there's new features, there's new markets that you're going after, and making sure that the team is well educated so that they can execute is critical to driving sales growth. There's also a bit of a Venn diagram there, right? So the enablement function, they can do courseware, they can do certification ware, they can make sure that the team is really well versed in going to market. But the last mile is very important. And so working collaboratively with the field operations organization really brings that to life. And so there's overlap between the enablement and field operations functions. The last one is classic sales operations. And Randy, you asked me earlier about the difference between revenue operations and sales operations. Sales operations is a team that typically reports into revenue operations now. And sales operations is responsible in our company for owning all sales applications. So that could be Salesforce. It could be our own instances from our own products of CPQ and CLM to help our sales reps, simply and easily configure and price and quote and ultimately contract for deals. But also it's important that they focus on just data hygiene within these systems and integrity of data so that we constantly are focused on a really solid view of who our customer is and who our prospects are so that we can serve our existing customers well and go after the right prospects.
So as I hear you describe revenue operations, it's certainly a multi-dimensional role with multiple facets to it and things to do. What advice would you give for others in terms of how do you prioritize in order to get the things done that move the needle for the business?
Yeah, Randy, it's a complicated question because I think that not all organizations are exactly the same, right? So organizations are in various stages of growth versus what I might call maturity. And so I'll try to answer this to where it's broadly applicable to all organizations. And people out there listening can figure out what are the right things for their business to make sure that they're executing on. But I'd say that the first priority for all revenue operations functions is to make sure that you are serving as a business partner to the sales organization. And the first priority for a sales organization is always to make sure that you're hitting your number. So there's a couple different pieces of that. One of them, Randy, is demand generation. It's one that you know well, and one that your team and my team intersects on a lot, and making sure that we are creating enough pipeline to ultimately make sure that we're hitting our sales numbers. there's a lot of things that tie to that. How are you going to market to reach the market, often with limited resources? I've talked about the scale efficiency, often of many prospects that you can go after, but a finite number of sellers. The second one I might mention is how good is your customer data to really fuel that go-to-market motion and to really understand your customers. I mentioned earlier that I was focused in the first year in building out a customer data platform. That was really about making sure that we improve the quality of our data so we could improve the quality of our outreach and make sure that it was more targeted. How great is your data to support your forecast process, right? So do you know when a contract, for example, when a contract's being redlined, does that data come back and populate the sales leader's forecasts? So an example of that is that there might be a term being redlined in your contract, which is something that you ultimately can't negotiate. So something that impacts revenue recognition, for example. And if that is being redlined with a customer, are those things coming back to your forecasting process to make sure that you're forecasting the right deals and you understand the sensitivities of what you're forecasting? That really brings us into sales execution and process. Critically important in any business that you make sure that you're executing against the pipeline that you have, and doing so with good data and good understanding of systems and processes is important to driving growth. Broadly, I think once you've nailed the process of acquiring new logos, how does data support your cross-sell and your upsell efforts? So all of these things are ways of getting to making sure that you're hitting your number. Secondly, I would say once you have a focus on driving operational efficiency in the broader sales organization to make sure that they're productive with their time and really aren't spending time what I might call thrashing to support sales growth, you have to focus there on things like customer outreach and alignment of resources to make sure that you're truly incremental to each other. We have multiple outbound prospecting units, for example, at Conga, and we really need to make sure that they're aligned with each other and that they're going to market in a way that's efficient so that they're really not tripping on each other or duplicating efforts. Secondly is the time to generate quotes and execute contracts. Many sales organizations spend an inordinate amount of time getting quotes out the door. And even with the quotes get out the door, sometimes it's pricing that you can't actually support and you have to reintroduce new pricing to a customer. Doesn't lead to a great customer experience. It also doesn't lead to a great employee experience. And it also just takes a lot of cycles. So driving operational efficiency in the quoting process and the contracting process necessary for booking deals is very important to driving sales growth and to making sure that the resources that are already finite in going after a large market are efficient in the way that they go to market. The amount of applications that are facing a sales team these days to help the sales team execute and the proliferation of data that comes from those sales applications are going to be critically important in the future. And making sure that you have the right data. And really, if you're trying to deliver revenue, you need data to make sure that you're executing that revenue lifecycle with your customers. CRMs have often contained lots of data, but the applications that come off of them and the amount of data that comes through those, I mentioned CPQ and CLM earlier, very important to helping understand what your obligations are from a customer, helping to really know what customers are contracted with, understanding from that what the natural upsell or cross-sell motion is, being able to do things like automate renewals with customers, all very important. And the baseline of all of that are sales applications and the amount of data that comes from those sales applications. The last thing I'll mention is that revenue operations is probably never the first function that any company thinks of. Hey, we really want to scale our revenue operations team. We are a necessary part of going to market, but I'm, as I mentioned earlier, very constantly focused on driving operational efficiency within my own team. So the more that I can help generate data, the more I can help with things, typical processes like deal desk or to help teams execute deals, or sale or order operations to make sure that the things are entered in a CRM correctly and that they sync well with an ERP system. The more operational rigor and efficiency that I can put into processes like that really helps limit the facilitation of, or the scale of my team, and helps me return resources back to the business to drive top line sales growth. So I think it's really about how do you manage all the data, how do you manage all the applications, how do you manage through the change management that's coming through the organization and really being the ultimate business partner to the sales organization to drive sales growth.
Jeff, thank you for the insights. Thank you for joining us. We invite you to learn more at Conga.com.